The wedding hall glowed with fairy lights, silk drapes, and loud whispers. Ada stood just beyond the double doors, her hands trembling against her bouquet. The scent of fresh roses clung to her dress, but it couldn't mask the sting of humiliation already crawling up her spine. Her gown was borrowed, her veil stitched by her neighbor, but it was her shoes, worn, faded silver heels, that drew the sharpest breath from the crowd the moment she stepped in. "Is she really wearing that?" someone muttered. The words sliced through the air like broken glass. Ada heard them. Everyone did. A groomsman snickered. 2 bridesmaids whispered into their palms. And then came the loudest insult from her soon-to-be mother-in-law. "Second-hand shoes? For my son's wedding? This is why I said she's not our class." Ada's eyes darted toward Emeka, her groom. He looked away. No defense. No shame. Just silence. She stood alone at the center of the aisle as the murmurs grew into a quiet storm. Ada's legs wobbled slightly. Her voice had vanished. She wished the ground would open. This wasn't how she imagined her big day. Not after everything she had survived. Still, she tried to smile, blinking away the tears. But inside her something cracked. Not because of the shoes, but because of the eyes that mocked her. The people who looked at her like she was nothing. Her mother sat in the front row, eyes wide with worry. She knew that look. It was the same look from nights when there was no food, when the rent was due, when Ada said she'd keep pushing no matter what. One more step, Ada told herself. Just walk. Just reach the altar. But as she moved, another voice pierced the silence. Does she think being pitted is enough to marry into wealth? Ada stopped. Something in her chest clenched. Her fingers dug into her bouquet. Her feet, those battered, second-hand feet, refused to move. And then, sirens. Loud. Sudden. Shocking. The entire hall turned. Outside, flashing blue lights filled the street. Uniformed men began lining the walkway. People gasped. Phones came out. Security agents in black filed in, eyes scanning the room. Ada froze. Her heart thudded in confusion. Then a hush swept over the hall as the crowd parted. A black SUV pulled up. Its door opened slowly. And from inside, a tall woman in white stepped out. The woman who once changed Ada's life forever. The First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. For a moment, no one moved. The First Lady's heels tapped softly against the marble floor as she entered the hall, her presence like thunder wrapped in silk. The same people who mocked Ada just seconds ago now stood in stiff silence, eyes wide, lips sealed. Ada didn't breathe, couldn't. Her memory flickered backward. Years ago, in the crowded office of a local NGO in Enugu. She was 17, her dress too big, her sandals falling apart. But her voice was steady as she recited the speech she'd written for the girls' education scholarship. And when she was done, one of the judges, a tall woman with eyes like sunlight, had stood and clapped. "That one," she had said. "We'll sponsor her." That woman was now walking toward her, surrounded by aides and armed guards. Present-day Ada blinked hard, trying to return to the moment. The whispers had vanished. Even Emeka now looked uneasy, straightening his suit as if he was trying to make sense of what was happening. But not his mother. She stepped forward boldly, blocking the First Lady's path. "Ma," she said with a tight smile. "You must be lost. This is a private event. A family wedding." The First Lady tilted her head slightly. "And I'm here for family," she replied calmly. She walked past her straight to Ada. Ada's lips parted, but no sound came. The First Lady took her hands gently. "Adeobi," she said with warmth. "I almost didn't make it, but I told them I must attend this girl's wedding." The cameras flashed. Gasps rippled through the guests. "You sponsored her?" a reporter whispered. "More than that," the First Lady said, turning slightly. "I believed in her when she had nothing but dreams and dust. She reminded me of myself." Ada felt the tears then, not from shame, but from something else. Vindication. The First Lady smiled and looked around the room. "I see you've all gathered to witness a union. But let me ask, Is it really a union when a woman is ridiculed for how she looks rather than honored for who she is? No one answered. The room fell into silence again. A camera crew that had come to cover the wedding now turned their full attention to Ada. Her trembling hands, her shoes, her story. And then, behind the guests, a flurry of movement. A journalist checked her phone and gasped. "She's trending," she whispered. "All over Twitter. Look #AdeaBeGrace." Outside, more security arrived. Aides opened the doors wider. Another figure stepped down from a second SUV. This time, it wasn't just the First Lady. The President himself had come. The moment the President stepped into the hall, a wave of shock rolled through the crowd like an invisible wind. Heads turned. Phones shot up. Security tightened instantly. But he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the woman in the second-hand shoes. Ada could barely process what was happening. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest, her eyes glassy from the heat of sudden attention. Beside her, the First Lady was still holding her hand, firm and protective. "Adeabi," the President said, his voice firm but kind. "My wife told me about you years ago. I remember your letter. The one about your mother selling Akba to send you to school." Ada opened her mouth, but words failed. "This girl," the First Lady said proudly, turning to the crowd, "walked barefoot for years just to attend classes. She didn't wait for the world to give her dignity. She built it for herself." More flashes, more murmurs. The entire atmosphere had shifted from mockery to reverence. The groom's side stood stiff, confused. Emika's mother's face was pale now, lips tightly pressed. She tried to smile, but no one was looking at her anymore. All eyes were on Ada. "She applied for our national scholarship program and came out first," the First Lady continued. "Even when we lost contact, I never forgot her." A reporter leaned into her cameraman and whispered, "This is gold. We're airing this live." Ada blinked through her tears. I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Say nothing," the First Lady replied. "Just stand tall. You've already said enough with your life." The President nodded. "We came here to honor you, not the event. You represent every young girl whose worth has been measured by the wrong things." Then he did something no one expected. He bowed his head slightly, respectfully toward her. The entire hall gasped. In one moment, the power balance shattered. The girl mocked for her shoes was now standing before the most powerful man in the country, and he was showing her respect. Behind her, Ada's mother began to weep silently. The band had long stopped playing. The MC stood frozen. Even Emika had stepped back like a stranger in his own wedding. Then the First Lady turned to Ada and whispered, "Come with me. You're not staying here." Ada looked at the altar, at Emika, at the gold-trimmed stage they had built to impress. Then she looked at the floor, at the scuffed toes of her old shoes, and she stepped off the aisle. Just 3 paces. But in those 3 paces, everything changed. Outside, the world was waiting. Online, her story was exploding. But inside that hall, the silence was deafening. Until a bridesmaid's voice cracked through the stillness. "Oh my God. She just hit 1 million views on Instagram." By the time Ada stepped out of the hall, her life had changed forever. The convoy pulled away with her inside, flanked by motorbikes and sirens that now felt more like applause than noise. Inside the SUV, her hands still trembled in her lap. Her phone buzzed nonstop, messages from old classmates, distant cousins, total strangers. "Adeabi-Grace," the First Lady said gently, placing a hand on hers. "The nation knows your name now." Ada looked at her in disbelief. "But I didn't do anything special." The First Lady smiled. "You endured. With grace. With dignity. And that, my dear, is a revolution on its own." Back at the wedding hall, the mood had shifted from celebration to crisis. Emika's parents sat red-faced, surrounded by whispers. A viral video now made the rounds online. Emika's mother scoffing, "Second-hand shoes? She's not our class." The public did not take it lightly. By noon, the hashtags had flooded every platform. #AdeaBeGrace, #Dignity in Shoes, #Shame on Elitism. TikToks, news segments, Facebook threads. Women uploaded pictures of their old shoes in solidarity. Activists called it a defining moment in class politics. Meanwhile, Ada sat quietly in the First Lady's residence, sipping tea she could barely taste. She stared out the window, lost in thought. She remembered washing those shoes by hand the night before, scrubbing the soles, polishing them with coconut oil because the leather was cracked. She remembered saying to herself, "Just get through the day, Ada. Just one more day of pretending you're enough." Now, the world was telling her she was more than enough. A knock came at the door. A government aide stepped in, smiling. "Ma, the president has requested you speak at next week's National Women's Empowerment Summit. He says, your voice needs to be heard." Ada's heart dropped. "Me?" she whispered. "Speak? At a summit?" The aide nodded. "You're already trending in 17 countries." Tears welled in her eyes. She thought about the girls in her old neighborhood, about the small, dusty library where she used to read borrowed newspapers and imagine a better life. She thought about her mother, now resting in the guest room of the presidential villa, finally free from shame. Ada took a deep breath. "I'll do it." That evening, as she lay in bed, her old shoes sat quietly by the window. A maid had offered to throw them away, but Ada had refused. "No," she'd said. "They carried me through fire." She closed her eyes with a new kind of peace. But far away, in a quiet apartment in Lagos, Emeka sat staring at his phone, face pale, lips pressed tight as a news anchor declared. And next week, Adeobi Grace will be seated beside the president and the First Lady at the National Summit. His mother's voice rang in the background. "You let her go. You let gold walk out in worn-out shoes." The grand hall of the Presidential Conference Center was nothing short of majestic. Gold chandeliers floated above polished mahogany floors. Camera crews swarmed like bees. Rows of high-profile guests, ministers, CEOs, diplomats, lined the audience, all waiting for the keynote speaker. A girl who once wore second-hand shoes to her own wedding. Ada stood behind the curtain, her palms sweating. Her gown today was elegant but simple ivory chiffon with hand-stitched patterns, chosen by the First Lady's stylist. Yet, her eyes still found their way down to her feet. Not heels, not luxury, just the same old shoes, cleaned, polished, and worn with pride. "They remind me who I am," she had said when asked if she'd wear something else. The announcer's voice echoed, "Please welcome Miss Adeobi Grace." Thunderous applause. Camera flashes. The moment she stepped on stage, a silence fell. A reverent silence. She paused at the microphone, heartbeat loud in her ears. Then she began. "I came here with nothing but courage stitched into my soul, and second-hand shoes on my feet. Not because I had no other choice, but because dignity does not require wealth. It requires heart." The room erupted again. Even the president stood to clap. Ada spoke for 15 minutes about poverty, shame, and rising again. She spoke of her late father, her mother's struggles, her dreams, and how shame almost stopped her from walking down that aisle. But most of all, she spoke about how respect must never be tied to riches. When she finished, people wept openly. Women embraced, and the president himself offered her a formal role as special youth advisor on girl-child advocacy. She didn't answer immediately. She only nodded. Her voice still caught somewhere between disbelief and joy. Later that day, she stepped outside onto the grand steps of the building. Media teams surrounded her, flashing bulbs and flying microphones. That's when she saw her, standing quietly in the back, wearing a faded blouse and skirt. Ngozi, her old schoolmate, the girl who used to laugh at her torn uniforms, who once shoved Ada's books into the gutter and called her asterisk gutter girl. Ada's heart stuttered. For a second, the world went quiet. Ngozi took one shaky step forward. Her voice was soft. "Ada, I don't know if you remember me." "I do. I came here to ask for help." Ada blinked. "My daughter," Ngozi continued, eyes already glistening. "She's smart. But we can't afford school anymore. I heard what you're doing. I just thought maybe." Ada stared at her. the past and present crashing into each other like waves. Ngozi, her old tormentor, was now begging the girl she once tried to break. And Ada had a choice to make. Ada looked at Ngozi, really looked at her. Gone was the sharp-tongued girl who once called her charity case. Standing before her now was a woman with sunken eyes, worn slippers, and desperation written across her face. She held the hand of a small girl, maybe 7, whose uniform was too short and whose shoes flapped at the sole. Ada bent down and smiled at the child. "What's your name?" The girl whispered, "Miracle." Ada's throat tightened. She straightened slowly and looked at Ngozi. "I remember everything," she said, voice calm. "Every laugh, every insult. Every day I walked home in silence because of you." Ngozi nodded, shame in her eyes. "I deserve it all." "But your daughter doesn't," Ada said gently. "She deserves a chance, just like I did." She pulled a card from her handbag. Women Rise Foundation. Founder, Adeobi Grace. "Bring her to our center on Monday," she said. "Uniform, books, school fees, everything will be taken care of." Ngozi's knees buckled. She fell to the ground, crying. But Ada didn't let her kneel. She helped her up, held her hand, the same way someone once held hers. That night, Ada returned to her new apartment in Lekki. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Bought quietly after her story had gone viral and dozens of women's groups donated in her name. A place with no gold drapes, no eyes judging her shoes, no silence punishing her worth. She placed the old pair of heels back on their special shelf. Above it hung a simple frame. Inside was a printed headline, "Second-hand shoes, first-class woman." The next morning, her inbox was flooded. More invitations, interviews, scholarship requests. But one message stood out. It was from Emeka. "I was wrong. I see that now. I just want to talk. Please." Ada stared at the message for a long time. Then she pressed delete. No anger, no hate, just peace. Later, at a small press conference, a reporter asked her, "If you could go back and change that day, wear different shoes, avoid the shame, would you?" Ada smiled. "I'd wear those same shoes again, because the world didn't respect me despite them. They respected me because of them." The room clapped. As the sun dipped outside the window, casting a soft glow over her modest desk, Ada sat with a cup of tea, wrapped in a simple wrapper, watching birds on the balcony. No horns, no noise, no mockery, only peace. She was no longer just the girl mocked at her wedding. She was a movement, a mentor, a miracle. And this time, when the world looked at her, she didn't shrink. She smiled, because she was more than enough. Always had been. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. We hope to see you in our next video.